In this village, even the dogs don't howl at the forest. That's because the dead do the howling. I didn't make that up. It was the first thing the wind told me the night I moved my cot against the western wall and decided to stop pretending I slept well. The wind in this place doesn't push. It peers. It slides through the grass like a slow breath. Nosing open shutters, you thought. You'd latched, nudging the water bucket until it creaks on its hook. And then, if you're quiet enough, it speaks. Today, the wind brought a stranger. By morning, the thatch roof steamed with the kind of damp that never quite leaves your bones. Moss ticked the edges of every tile. The lanes were not much more than ruts glossy with last night's drizzle. The villagers did what they always do, talked by not talking. They kept their heads down when the stranger passed, but I could hear the words gathered. In their throats, dry as seeds, captain, hunters, missing men. Don't look at the tree line. I stood under my porch and let the damp climb my ankles. The house I live in is not mine, not really. It belongs to whoever is brave enough or foolish enough to sleep, where voices knock at the beams at odd hours. Nobody fought me for it. From here, you can see the first rank of trees. They stand too close together, like men who have known war and are waiting for it again. Bark armored and dark, tops lost to a low sky. The boundary stone is 3 paces from my steps. I watch it like other men watch the road. The stranger came by the road, of course. Tall, carrying authority the way some carry their shoulders, like it's heavy and never set down. 35, I'd guess, though age sits oddly in people who've spent more afternoons than most waiting for the next bad thing. His coat marked him, Captain of Hunters, the village whisper insisted. The kind that knows what to do with claws and teeth and men afraid of both. The kind that looks at a map and then at the place the map was trying to be and moves anyway. He took the measure of the square with one sweep and began to ask questions that landed like stones in a shallow pool. He didn't raise his voice. The villagers flinched anyway, not at him but at what his questions were hooked to. How many? He asked the cobbler. 2, the cobbler said. A lie. The leather on his hands trembled. 3, said the baker without meeting his eyes. 4, the wind corrected, and I breathed out. Spirits don't count the way we do. They count by missing chairs and mothers who set bowls at empty places out of habit and men who stop singing mid-chorus because the harmony feels too wide. Where? The captain asked the blacksmith. The blacksmith touched his cap and didn't touch the boundary stone. The captain's mouth made a hard line. He turned and followed their avoidance until it pointed like a compass needle to the tree line. I could feel his shoulders tighten even from my porch, a small flinch. Under the coat, the way a man braces a heartbeat before a blade lands. He didn't believe in the way we believe, not yet. But belief isn't required. The forest handles denial the same way it handles the rain. It takes it in and turns it into something else. They say, the baker's wife started and then stopped. She was looking at my porch. By afternoon they always do. They say there's someone who hears, the cobbler muttered. Someone who hears too much, the blacksmith corrected. Felix, the wind said. And the name came back to me on 3 directions at once, sudden as a sparrow. I am not beloved here, but I am used. The way you use a knife you don't trust. Careful fingers, careful eyes. If you cut yourself, it's your fault for holding it wrong. He knows, the baker's wife said, softer. He listens. He's not right, the blacksmith said, which is true. There is a promissory note in my veins that isn't paid yet. It hums sometimes, a tether pulled taut from a place the living can't stand. The captain let the words fan out and then closed them with one sentence. Point me. No one pointed. They didn't need to. I was already on my steps, hands in the pockets of a sweater gone shiny at the elbows, bare feet cooling on the damp plank. I could have stepped back inside, closed the door, let him fight the forest with his neat maps and clean orders. I did not. He looked at me the way men look at cliffs, the kind of look that measures fall and climb both, old habit flicking over danger and route, and then, before I could decide whether his mouth would make pity or challenge, his eyes moved to the forest and stayed there half a second too long. You're the one, he said. No introduction. People who carry rank forget that names soften sharp things. I am one, I agreed. There are many ones. That's how counting works. Something like amusement flickered under the flat planes of his face. It is a strange kind of fun, prodding a man who has never liked being prodded. The wind liked it too. It teased a strand of hair across his brow. He didn't move to brush it away. "I'm Captain Kael of the Hunter Corps," he said finally, as if my house had demanded a password and he had decided to comply. "Men under my command entered the forest 3 nights ago and didn't return." "4," I said. His gaze sharpened. 3 reported missing. 2 squads, 1 returned with injuries, 1 did not return. "Names? The dead don't carry names the way you think," I cut in. "They carry shapes. They carry the weight of a touch that used to fit a shoulder. If you need names to give the priest, I can't help you, if you want to know where the hollow feels widest." I looked at the line where the trees started to knit the sky. "That I can do." His jaw tightened. The soldier's captain had to clench something. Better teeth than a fist. "What exactly are you?" he asked. "A bad listener," I said. And then, "Because humor is a better shield than most," added, "and a worse liar, which makes living here complicated." The cobbler made a gesture under his apron meant to ward off. The baker's wife pressed her mouth flat, and then, surprising herself, spoke. "He tells the truth," she said to Kael. "Only to those who tell it back." Kael's eyes returned to me. "You can tell a man who has ordered others to die. Their gaze is a ledge they've learned to stand on. Then tell me what you hear now." The wind answered before I could. It came soft along the lane, stirred the moss so the green brightened a shade, and brought with it a thread of sound from beyond the boundary stone. Not words, not yet. A long sound that wasn't animal. Animals complain when they hurt. This sound held itself like a spine. "Do you hear it?" I asked him. He shook his head. Of course he didn't. Most people only hear when it's too late to run. "It's worse at night," I said. "But it's simpler by day. Less trickery." "I don't care about trickery," he said. "I care about my men. And the men after them," I said gently. "And after those, the ones you will be told to send, because orders say the forest is a problem to fix and not a mouth to feed." He took a step closer to my porch. He didn't look up, I did. His height was a fact I could inventory, along with the worn edge of his coat and the crease in his left boot where he turned out his foot, probably after an old injury. "Hunters are catalogs of healed damage. Come with me," he said. 2 words, very little air around them, the way men accustomed to being obeyed pack a sentence. He smelled like leather and cold iron and the kind of soap the quartermaster buys in bulk. I let the smells pass and looked at the place he didn't show. The place right under, the sternum that braced like a hand held up against a blow you're not sure will land. "No," I said. A line cut between his brows. "No? I don't step past the stone before noon. That is not a rule I made, it is one I observed. Also, you're lying." He didn't flinch, but the villagers near the well did, as if the word itself could chafe skin. He wasn't lying about the men. He was lying about something smaller, something he thought didn't matter. Men like him don't call it lying. They call it trimming or leaving out. The spirits call it noise. "What lie?" he asked, voice even. "You said you don't care about trickery," I said. "You care a lot about trickery. It frightens you more than teeth. You can see teeth coming." His mouth opened and then closed on whatever he'd been about to say, a decision. I watched move across his face like a shadow, quick and unpracticed. He wasn't used to being read. I am not kind when I do it, but I am not cruel either. Cruelty feeds the wrong mouths. The baker's wife made a small sound. The blacksmith looked at the boundary stone again, as if it had grown a second head. Kael's gaze stayed on me. I felt the tug, there's always a tug, human as thirst, toward the place where his fear showed. I have to be careful with that. Fear is information, but it is also a bridge. If you walk too far onto it, it will take you places that are not yours to go. "Then you tell me when," he said at last. "Afternoon," I said. "When the shade shortens. When the worst of yesterday has been swallowed, and the forest is hungry for today, but hasn't yet chosen its flavor." "You talk like a priest," he said. "I talk like a man who would like to be left alone," I said. "And who isn't?" For a moment, Something that wasn't humor, respect, maybe, softened the harder shapes of his face. It lasted as long as a blink. When it was gone, he had his captain look back on, the one that brackets grief with purpose and calls it duty, because otherwise you would drown. Fine, he said. After noon, the villagers had drifted closer without noticing, drawn the way you're drawn to a cliff edge in a fog. I could feel their eyes like moths hitting a window. They wanted me to fix it. They wanted me to be wrong. They wanted both at once. They often do. I went inside. The room is not large. A table, a cot, 3 hooks on a beam for the 3 things I own that hang. The spirit stains on the plaster are the color of tea left too long on the stove. I set water to warm and took down the cup with the hairline crack nobody but me can feel. By the time the kettle sighed, footsteps sounded on my steps. He had not waited until noon to return. He had waited the time it takes to walk from the square to the well, say 2 words to a woman with a scarf tied too tight, walk back and reconsider. A captain with patience would have sent a man. He hadn't. Good. It's hard to listen through messengers. He didn't knock. Most people don't. Knocking implies the other might say no. He filled the doorway and let the chill from outside push past his coat into my house. You could try the doorframe, I said, and poured tea anyway. It hasn't failed anyone yet. I need to see the root, he said. The one your wind favors. I handed him the cup. Then drink like you mean it. The forest takes more kindly to people who warm their hands first. I don't believe that, he said, but he wrapped his fingers around the cup the way cold men always do, like it's an apology they might accept. He didn't drink. He looked. At the table, at the stains, at the quiet way, the window curtains stirred with no help from a human hand. What is it you do exactly? He asked. He had tucked the edge off his tone, as if he had sanded it down before walking back, making himself a shape that would not splinter the first touch. I listen, I said. I sort what is mine from what isn't. I return what I can. I keep what I must until it loosens its teeth. And in return? He said. There it was again. The hunter's arithmetic, a tally book for every exchange. In return, I said. Sometimes I sleep. Sometimes I hear laughter that isn't trying to make me follow it somewhere dark. Sometimes the dogs forget to be quiet. His eyes cut sideways to the window. The lane was empty. The tree line did not move. The moss shone green, a bright bruise on the village's brow. He set the cup down untouched. Captain, I said. He looked back. You howl loudly, I told him, and let the words be as gentle as they could be. Is that from fear? The question surprised him. Not the words. Men like him have had worse thrown at them. The gentleness. He didn't know where to put it. He drew a breath like the beginning of a denial, then held it. The denial hung between us, a thin animal caught in a snare, neither of us touching it. When he exhaled, the breath trembled once before he caged it again. Afternoon, he said, and there was no lie in it this time. Afternoon, I agreed. Outside, the wind turned its face to the forest and listened back. Somewhere in that green dark, a long, low sound uncoiled, patient and certain, like a promise laid at a threshold. The dogs, wisely, said nothing at all. The forest did not wait for us to enter. It leaned forward, expectant, like an audience before the curtain rose. Noon had thinned the shadows, but not enough to make them kind. Light fractured in slices through the high canopy, breaking against the trunks and falling in pieces on the pathless ground. The air was heavy, wet, close, as if the forest wanted to weigh every breath, to know how much of us belonged here. I walked barefoot, as always. The earth was damp and cool, and the roots pressed like ribs beneath my soles. I've found that if you let the soil recognize you, it's less likely to trip you. My steps were measured, not out of fear but because the forest likes patience. Behind me, Kael's boots struck with sharp precision, each one a small declaration of intrusion. The forest noticed. It always does. His hand hovered near his weapon. The motion repeated itself, unconscious as blinking. Soldiers carry their reassurance on their hips, polished steel where softer men carry charms. But steel is not enough here. Not when the wind had already slipped under his collar to taste the skin at his neck. "You're tense," I said. "I'm careful," he corrected. "Careful is when you step lightly so the dead don't mistake you for one of them," I murmured, not turning back. "Tense is when you make the ground ring like a bell with every step." He grunted something, agreement or annoyance, I couldn't tell. The forest liked his noise. It bent a few branches together overhead, creaking a sound not unlike laughter. "You're hearing things," he muttered. "I always do." I tilted my head, listening. The voices here aren't like human words. They ride in the pitch of birdsong, in the groan of bark, in the sigh that presses under your ribs when the light dims without a cloud. The trick is sorting them from the ones you make yourself. Kael fell into stride beside me. I saw the lines at his jaw flexing, the same way a hound stiffens before a storm. He was thinking loudly, though he didn't know it. 3 men gone. Should have been 4, maybe 5. Orders say retrieve or confirm. But what if... 4, I said aloud. His head snapped toward me. "What? You keep circling it in your thoughts. Stop pretending you don't know. 4 men. Not 3. His eyes narrowed. "Stay out of my head." I smiled faintly. "I never said I was in it. You're just... noisy." He exhaled sharply through his nose. "You expect me to believe you can read thoughts?" "No," I said, ducking under a low branch. "I expect you to notice when your secrets echo. The dead hear them even louder than I do. They like the taste of fear wrapped in silence. It's a delicacy." He made a sound halfway between a scoff and a curse, but he didn't argue further. He was learning already. The deeper we went, the less the light cared to follow. The canopy wove itself denser, each patch of sky shrinking into a coin of brightness that the wind hoarded jealously. The trunks were not merely trees, but columns, gray and slick, their bark veined with lichen, that glimmered faintly, as if it had caught starlight long ago, and was reluctant to let it go. Kael's pace faltered once when a branch cracked under his boot. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. "Too loud," I said softly. "You breathe like a man signaling." His brows pulled tight. "Signaling." "The dead think it's a call, like a horn." The look he gave me could have killed lesser humor. I only tilted my head, listening again. The truth is, his breath was harsh, forced deeper than it should have been. "Fear wears many coats, and one of them is called vigilance." "You really enjoy provoking me," he said after a beat. "Enjoy?" I repeated. "No, but it keeps your pulse steady, which keeps them from circling closer. So perhaps I enjoy the quiet that follows." He muttered something unsoldierly and pressed on. The first whisper touched us near a clearing. It didn't speak in words, not at first. It dragged the air sideways, pulling a chill across our shoulders like a damp hand. I felt it coil toward me, the way old acquaintances do, with recognition that tightens the chest. Felix. It was my name, but softened, drawn long. My step faltered, bare toes curling against the soil. Kael's hand was instantly at my elbow. "What is it?" I swallowed, steadied myself, and shook my head once. "You wouldn't hear it." He didn't let go. His grip was steady, professional, not kind but not cruel either. The forest shivered around us, waiting for me to answer the voice. I didn't, not yet. But Kael saw. He was watching me too closely not to. What just happened? He pressed. I met his eyes. The wind pressed my hair against my cheek, a small trick, as if it wanted to remind him I wasn't alone here. "They called my name," I admitted. His jaw tightened. He looked around at the empty clearing with a soldier's precision, as though the enemy might be hiding behind a fern. But this enemy lives in marrow, not shadows. He didn't like that he couldn't aim at it. "Does that happen often?" "Always," I said simply. We moved again. He kept glancing at me, as if waiting for another sign. I kept my steps slow, letting the roots tell me their pattern. When I stumbled slightly on one, his hand darted out again, steadying me. That was when he saw it. The sleeve of my sweater slipped back as I straightened, and the marks caught the fractured light. Pale ridges, burned deep into the skin long ago, still sharp as brands. The pattern curved, almost a circle, but broken. Kael froze. His fingers hovered near the scar but didn't touch. What is that? I pulled the sleeve down calmly. A reminder. Of what? That not all bonds end when they should. His gaze stayed on the place where the mark had vanished beneath wool. His eyes weren't just hard now. They were calculating, connecting lines on a map that led to the missing men. Those soldiers, he said slowly. They disappeared in the same part of the forest you walk freely in. I don't walk freely, I interrupted. I walk carefully. And if you think I had anything to do with your men vanishing, then you should have drawn your blade already. Why haven't you? He stared at me, lips a thin line. His hand hovered near the hilt, but didn't move. Finally, he muttered, because something tells me killing you would only make things worse. I smiled again, tired this time. A rare moment of wisdom. The forest groaned then, a sound like timber splitting under weight, and the voice returned. Clearer, heavier, as though it had been waiting for me to step exactly here. Felix. It curled around my bones, the way a hand wraps an old wound. My breath caught. Kael noticed instantly. His voice came low, rough. Talk to me. What is it? I wanted to shrug it off, to say nothing. But the pressure in my chest betrayed me. My calm mask cracked, if only for a heartbeat. My eyes must have shown it, the fear, the pull. He looked at me then not as a captain, but as a man trying to understand. It's connected to you, he said. All of this, the disappearances, the voices, it's pulling on you. I steadied my breathing, forced my face back into calm. Maybe, I allowed. Maybe not. Don't, he said sharply. Don't hide behind riddles now. I met his eyes. And if the riddle is the only thing keeping it from taking me? He didn't have an answer. His grip on his weapon tightened. But he didn't draw it. His eyes were fixed on me, as if I might unravel before him. We walked on, slower now. The silence stretched taut. I could feel the forest pressing closer with every step. The voices weren't finished. They never are. And Kael, he was beginning to understand. He didn't want to, but he was. He saw the cracks in me, the scars I tried not to show, the way the forest called me as if I belonged more to it than to him. For the first time, I saw something shift in his expression. Not suspicion, not anger. Recognition. A dawning thought that his missing soldiers might not be merely victims of the forest, but collateral in a binding that had never let me go. And in that moment, I hated the truth of it almost as much as I hated the way his eyes softened when he saw me falter. Because the dead do not rest, and neither, it seems, do I. The path, if there ever had been one, gave up the pretense of direction. The farther we walked, the more the forest arranged itself into corridors that refused to stay straight. Light fell in thinner coins now, tarnished at the edges. The damp thickened until even Kael's measured breathing sounded muffled, as if wrapped in wool. Sometimes when a forest grows old enough, it forgets it is many trees and decides to be one body. This one had done that a long time ago. We were walking through a throat. A long howl stirred that throat. Not animal, not weather. It reached past the skin and plucked a string strung nearer the bone. Kael stopped dead. I felt him listening the way soldiers do. Eyes wide but not panicked, body still, mind dividing fear into useful and useless. You heard it, I said. I heard something, he allowed. I've hunted wolves. That was not a wolf. No, I said. It's older than wolves. We stepped into a clearing that wasn't a clearing so much as a pause. Moss glossed the stones in sullen green, their surfaces slick where the light kissed them. The stones cut the space into a ring. 5 knee-high markers, one toppled, the fallen face carved with symbols so old the moss wore them like clothes. Kael crouched at the nearest stone and brushed aside a strip of lichen with the back of his glove. His hand was careful. Soldiers learn to be precise with what they don't yet understand. The marks underneath were shallow and worn, curls of lines that almost made a circle but deliberately broken at the top. You know what these are, he said without looking up. I know what's left of what they were, I said. The dead give you vocabulary and then take away grammar. You're left to guess the rest. Bindings. But simple ones. For animals. For weather. This place had rules. And now? Now it has appetite. The wind didn't move, but the clearing shivered anyway, a ripple traveling the ground like a thought trying to become a word. Felix, the air said, closer. My name should have been a small thing. 2 syllables that sit neatly in the mouth. But here it unfurled into a shape that used to be a hand on my shoulder, and a breath. Against my neck, and the habit of turning, when a certain footstep stopped behind me. Memory is a thing with fingers. Kael rose, gaze snapping to me. He saw it happen. The way my spine drew taut. The small shift of my mouth that I can never quite hide when the past stands up too close. He didn't ask if I was all right. Men like him don't insult pain by pretending they can't see it. He asked simply, "Who?" I kept my eyes on the stones because they were safer than his face. "Once," I said, the word dry in my throat, "there was an alpha. He wasn't from the village. He came with a patrol like yours. Not under your flag, but another." He didn't listen at first, either. Kael's jaw moved once, a muscle ticking. And I listened for him, I said. "We were bound." Those are polite words. The real word is a smaller, uglier thing. We made a promise, and then we believed it would hold in places where promises go thin. "And he died," Kael said, not as a question, but as if aligning his feet before a leap. "In this forest," I said to the moss, "on a night like a closed fist." The binding didn't end where his breath did. Kael's breath went a fraction shorter. Steel and command will carry most men across most chasms. This wasn't most. "You're telling me a spirit is holding you." "I'm telling you a spirit is holding on," I said. "If I'm held, it's because some part of me allows it. That's not how death should work," he said, and for the first time his voice shook, only a little, the way a blade shivers when the whetstone catches on a chip. "The dead don't get to keep the living." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the honesty of it stunned me. "They do," I said softly. "All the time. They keep places, they keep habits, they keep the exact way your hand closes around a door latch when you meant to leave quietly and didn't." He turned, taking in the stones as if he could slot the world back into rules with the right angle of a glance. "I don't accept it." "Then don't," I said. "Your refusal might be the only useful thing we brought." His eyes snapped to mine. "Useful. For ending it. For changing it," I said. He shook his head once. Sharp. "If a spirit is holding you, I cut it loose." "You cut at a rope when you can see it," I said. "This one runs through bone. If you pull without knowing, you tear something that won't grow back right." The howl came again, closer, longer, bending the air until the clearing trembled. Kael's hand went to his blade because that is what hands trained in the world of edges know to do. I didn't stop him. "Sometimes ritual is a brace more than a weapon. Stay with me," he said. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and the lie tasted like old wine. Not malicious, not sweet, just stale. I stepped toward the fallen stone. The broken circle on its face might have once meant safety or warning, depending on which side you stood. I put my palm on the cold etching, and never quite touched it. The moss between us was a mercy. Touch can be a door. "You were stubborn," I said to the nothing that was not nothing. "You were always stubborn." "Felix." That voice again, now tangled with a second sound that wasn't a word but a command. I closed my eyes. If I kept them open, I would see Kael's silhouette, and that would confuse the part of me that remembered another silhouette. The way it blocked a fire's light, the smell of smoke in a coat collar, laughter that came easier than mine ever did. "Felix, look at me," Kael said. I did. It took effort. He was nearer than I'd realized, the fine wear of his coat a map of old work. Up close, the lines around his eyes told their own history, sun and squint, and a habit of holding something back until he was sure it was earned. "Tell me his name," Kael said. The forest did not like that. It pressed on my tongue, a hand over my mouth from the inside. "No," I said. "You don't bind the dead by a living man's name. You just wake the wrong things." "You made a promise," he said. "I did," I said. "We both did." He promised to come back. I promised to wait. Kael's thumb moved against the leather of his hilt, a small sound that still found its way through the hush. And you are still waiting, and he is still trying, I said. We stood in the pause that follows a truth. Even the insects quieted, as if courtesy applied to confessions. How long? He asked finally. Years, I said. His mouth tightened. No. I meant, how long can you stand it? I almost smiled. It wasn't a soldier's question. It was a man's. Some days, I said, I forget I'm waiting. I hang a pot. I mend a seam. I listen to someone tell me how their cousin used to sing off-key and it is almost a blessing. Other days, I gestured to the trees. I am held like a note that doesn't resolve. And I think if I could just step 2 inches farther into the dark, it would stop hurting. The wind moved at that. A quick slap, like a friend offended on my behalf. We both flinched. Kael recovered first. We're ending it, he said. Now. You don't get to decide when the dead loosen their teeth, I said. That's the point of teeth. I'm not asking them, he said, and there it was. The stubbornness I had accused someone else of, repurposed, sharpened for me. I'm telling them. Or I'm killing whatever stands between you and your own breath. You can't kill a memory with a blade, I said. Good thing I brought more than a blade, he returned. What then? I asked, weary and curious in equal measure. He looked at me until I had to lower my eyes. That felt like losing ground and gaining something else. Myself, he said quietly. You'll anchor to something. If it's not him, it can be the living. That's not how it works, I said too quickly. How would you know? He said. Not a challenge but a mirror, if you've never tried. The forest hated him then. It came close, closer than it had since we crossed the boundary stone. Shadows gathered without a visible source, thickening in the spaces between trees. The ring of stones hummed like a mouth closed on a scream. Back, I said, grabbing his sleeve before I thought about it. Instinct, not decision. The contact lit a fuse up my arm and lodged behind my sternum. He didn't step back. He stepped in. Felix, the voice commanded. Barely wind now, more the shape of a word than the sound of it. The mark on my arm burned the old burn, the kind that doesn't heat the skin as much as it heats the memory of skin. I reeled, and Kael moved with me, quick as a man who has been practicing being quick for half his years. His hand found my wrist. He didn't squeeze, he steadied. Not possession, presence. The world eddied. I have been pulled before, by grief, by habit, by the rememberings that wear familiar faces until you stop asking them to take them off. This pull was all of those on a rope made of my own making. Stay, Kael said, the word rough and gentled at once. With me, the thing about voices from elsewhere is that they rarely beg. They threaten, they promise, they command. Begging is for breathers. The command in my name tugged again, harder. Somewhere just under hearing, steps circled the clearing. 3, 4? They didn't sound like soldiers, not anymore. The dead learned silence faster than the living do. Kael's grip warmed where it held me. Warmth, a fact, not a metaphor. I had told him earlier the forest favored those who warmed their hands first. I should have listened to my own lesson. Tell me, he said, and the practiced authority in his tone had softened into something else. Tell me what he was to you. 100 answers lined up, some truer than others. He made the world feel less like a test, I said. He heard me hearing things and didn't try to fix it. He laughed into my mouth. The forest snapped, jealousy, or just the mockery of a thing that hates what it cannot hold. The shadows bled a little darker. Kael's hand tightened, and with it, the tremor in my breath eased a fraction. And what are you to him now? Kael asked. A habit, I said. A promise he keeps remembering. And what do you want to be? He said. I closed my eyes because the answer embarrasses me. Free, I said. And it sounded small even to me. Something like air left him in a soundo uniform teaches a man to make. He angled his body between me and the thickest of the dark, as if his shadow could put its shoulder against something that didn't have a door. The voice came again, and this time it pulled at the softest parts of me, the version of my name he used after I'd tripped and swore I hadn't, the shapes of our mornings, the indignation in his laugh when I told him apples taste like chalk if you eat them polite. I could have stepped forward then and ended the conflict neatly by choosing not to choose. The easiest surrender is the one you dress up as inevitability. Kael's thumb traced once along the inside of my wrist, acknowledging the pulse there, and some feral pragmatic piece of me counted, living beats, present tense. His next words should have been a barked order. That's how captains hold a line. Instead, he said, "I will not replace him." I flinched as if he'd struck me, and then realized why it steadied me. Replacement is a violence. To ask me to lay a new shape over an old set of bones and pretend it fit would have been another leash. He wasn't doing that. He was offering something with edges honest enough to trust. "I will stand," he said simply, "until you can." The wind pressed at us from every direction, irritated, impatient. The ring stones ticked, an old temple noise waking in their bellies. I lifted my free hand and set 2 fingers on the broken circle cut into the fallen stone, not touching, not opening the door, only remembering the hinge. "I can't let you kill him," I said. "Whatever him is now." Kael didn't move, didn't argue. "Then don't. But don't let him keep you." "I don't know how to separate those 2 truths," I said, a little angry at the honesty and a little grateful. "Then we learn," he said. The forest tightened again, and under the howl that wasn't a howl, I heard other steps, the echo of discipline loosening. The way men trained to return forgot which way the path lay when the path decided to lean away from them. The missing soldiers had come this far. I tasted the metallic edge of their fear. "They're in it," Kael said quietly, following my glance to the hard seam of dark between the trees. "They're in whatever this is. They brushed teeth they didn't see," I said. And the forest learned the taste. Kael's grip became a vow instead of a reflex. "We're taking them back." "And what if taking me back is the hinge?" I asked, because the shape of a terrible answer had just settled in. "What if he only lets go when I do?" Kael didn't say the easy thing. He didn't say we'd cross that bridge. He said, "Then we build a better one." The leverage of that steadied me, something to push against other than the pull. The voice said my name again, almost tender this time, the way you talk to a wild animal when you want it to come close enough to collar. I looked at the place in the air where it felt thickest and said, not loudly but with the authority of a man telling the truth about himself, "I am not yours." The forest recoiled like a struck thing. The mark on my arm burned and then cooled, the ache changing color from red to a manageable blue. It wasn't victory, it was a breath. Kael did not let go. I did not ask him to. The shadows didn't break, but they blinked. Blinked, yes, that's the word. A hesitation, enough to let me see that the ring of stones was not meant for binding men but for telling them where to stand when they needed to remember who they were. "I will tell you the rest," I said to Kael, the promise surprising us both. "Not here. Not while it can listen with my mouth." He nodded once, slow, as if any quick movement might rattle the small balance we'd managed. "We move," he said, "but not back. We go where this thing thinks it is strongest." "The heart," I said, and the forest quivered, pleased to be recognized. The howl followed us when we left the clearing, longer now, stretching itself thin to reach. It tried the shape of my name again. But something in the sound had changed. I had changed it. Not much, just enough that the next step was my own. Kael walked at my shoulder, a presence that didn't crowd, a steady heat, at my wrist, and then, when it was safe enough to do so, at my elbow. He was not a replacement. He was a fact. I fit my breath to his without meaning to, and heard, for the first time, in too long, a second rhythm that did not ask me to disappear into it. The forest can keep many things. Not this. Not anymore. The heart of the forest pretends to be a place, but it is a decision. We stepped into it, and silence stepped into us. The ring was larger than the others, tall stones shouldered through the turf like vertebrae, their faces furred with grass and old inscriptions. The ground ran flat for a breath's width, and then swelled slightly. as if the earth itself had inhaled and held that breath too long. Light came thin and stubborn, coins caught on a spider's web. The air had the taste of iron and old rain. We crossed the grass as men cross a chapel, without planning to. Kael's presence drew tight beside me, not crowding, not leaving. He had stopped trying to make his boots quiet. He had learned they would never be quiet enough. The wind arrived from nowhere and everywhere at once, lowering its head through the ring like an animal that knew this path. It brought the long sound I knew better than the shape of my own hand, the howl that wasn't one. This time, it wore words openly. Felix. It said my name like the lift of a collar, like the start of a habit. The word didn't fall on my ears. It hooked the old place behind my breastbone where the promise had always lived. My knees wanted to fold. My mouth wanted to agree. I did none of those things. I stood. The shadow stepped forward from between two stones and made the illusion of a man. Not a face, not really. Features were a suggestion the dark made when it felt generous. But the eyes, those were not suggestion. They were gold the way a coin is gold, heavy, minted, familiar. I had tried to forget that once. You cannot forget the color of the room in which you learned your own name. Kael's hand brushed my sleeve. Nothing more. The restraint steadied me. Felix, the shadow said again. It wasn't cold. Jealousy has its own temperature. Come. My mouth tried the shape of yes out of old obedience. I closed my teeth on it and tasted the copper of almost. You always were late to prayer, I said, and the humor came out brittle, a glass rung with a fingernail. The gold eyes flared. Around the ring, grass leaned inward as if the ground had turned toward me. Kael's voice found me low and human in a world that wasn't. You're not his. The shadow tilted, considering him, and for a moment I felt a wicked, exhausted affection for Kael's audacity. He spoke into another man's memory as if it owed him courtesy. He is kept, the dark said, not with a mouth, but with the conviction of a hand laid over mine in winters past. He promised. He lived, Kael said. Heat climbed the back of my neck. I couldn't name whether it was anger or longing. They share a doorway. I did, I said to the dark. I did live. Poorly, often. But also, truthfully. The shadow shuddered, surprised perhaps that I had answered it with anything but my feet. The howl braided itself under the words, tugging at the soft parts of memory, the mornings and the apples and the way I used to laugh quieter than him and then louder because he asked me to. I felt the marks on my arm wake under my sleeve, itching with the old burn. Return, said the voice that had once been my favorite sound, and the order inside the word buckled my spine. Kael stepped between me and the thickest part of the dark without blocking my view. He didn't raise his blade. He didn't even touch it. He simply stood there, a line the forest hadn't drawn, and spoke like a man whose voice had learned to carry over walls. You are not his shadow, he said, not looking at me because he trusted I was listening. You're alive. If you want to be alive, come with me. It was not a plea. Pleading twists the hinge the wrong way. It was a door, held open, not pulled. The ringstones ticked, old bellies waking to old work. The grass leaned farther in. The howl tightened. The golden eyes narrowed, and the shadow stepped just enough that the light on its edges stuttered. I could feel his impatience. No, that's wrong. Spirits don't have patience to begin with. I felt his hunger. Felix, the shadow said, and now the syllables wore all the mornings it had ever said my name, and the evenings and the nights. It offered familiarity the way a hunter offers salt to a skittish colt. Come back to the thing that doesn't ask you to change. Come back to the easy story. Come back to the promise you can keep without standing up. A part of me took a step. Kael's hand found my wrist again. Not to pull, to weigh, to remind. I looked down at that hand, glove rough with use, knuckles scarred honest, and my own pulse answered it in my skin, present tense. I had said I wanted to be free, the forest herd wanting the way a dog hears a leash. I promised to wait, I said to the dark, keeping my voice steady by force. I waited. I am done. The shadow moved as if recoiling, only to swing forward again. The gold in its eyes burned a fraction hotter, and jealousy showed its teeth. Behind the stones, the dark pressed in, and in that pressure I heard other feet. The echo of discipline turned to panic, the shape of my missing soldiers caught like fish in a weir. He was keeping them the way he kept me by insisting the last good story had been told, and all that was left was to repeat it. "Felix," Kael said, and I didn't have to look to know he was still watching the shadow. "You don't have to replace him to release him. You only have to choose yourself." Choosing myself was always the problem, I said, and the old bitterness bleached my tongue. "Then make it the solution," he said softly. The shadow decided to be more than shadow. It thickened. Edges gathered. The suggestion of shoulders, the feeling of a man stepping close enough for his coat to brush mine. The shape knew where to stand. That knowledge hurt. The eyes burned, and under their gold I saw a memory, a mouth that had laughed into mine and then promised. He had kept promising me ever since. "Come," he said again, and a lesser man would have called that gentleness. The marks on my arm flared, and I felt the burn in 2 times at once, then and now. The circle carved into me began its old ache, the way a phantom limb will ache, because a mind is unsatisfied with subtraction. I could have asked Kael to cut it. I could have asked him to pull me by force across the ring and call it rescue. Another kind of leash, decorated with gratitude. I did not ask him. I stepped toward the fallen stone, toward the broken symbol. Circle severed at the top. I had always read it as failure, as something that had not held. Today, seen from the angle of a man whose wrist was warmed by a living hand, I read the brokenness as choice. A circle you can step out of. I set my palm just above the moss, a breath of space between skin and stone, and spoke not to the dark, but to the part of me that had made it welcome. "I love you," I said, not loudly, but perfectly. The truth didn't need volume. I loved you then. I loved the fact of you having been. "But I am not your echo." The howl stammered. The golden eyes, thin to coins, held too long in a fist. "I release you," I said, and the words cost. "Not because you ask it. Because I do." The marks under my sleeve brightened to a pain that made the edges of my sight go soft. The ringstones thrummed, the note churches forget, and wolves never knew. The dark pressed in so hard I felt my ribs complain, and still I held my palm at that intentional distance, unwilling to make the mistake of touching door to door. "Felix," the voice said, and now there was hurt in it. The offense of a tide told it could not drag this shore. "You promised." "I promised to wait," I said. "I didn't promise to die." The world flexed. The grass flattened around my feet. Somewhere, a bird made the mistake of calling, and was shushed by 1,000 leaves at once. Kael didn't move, but I felt him change, the way a man steels himself to catch something that might fall. His restraint was a rope I tied around my own waist. Not to drag me, to give me something to pull against. "I cannot go where you are," I said to the shadow, and the admission made me dizzy with relief and grief together. "And you cannot stay where I am." The golden eyes flickered with something I recognized too well, refusal masquerading as faithfulness. It stepped the last half step a ghost can step, and reached for my shoulder with the idea of a hand. Kael did not swat at smoke. He didn't bark an order. He spoke like a man naming a fact that the room had been pretending not to see. "He is alive," he said to the dark. "You're not." For a heartbeat, the forest forgot to make sound. I turned my hand and laid 2 fingers. Only 2, the most fragile truth, touching the oldest mark, above the broken circle on the fallen stone. I did not press. I did not pray. I simply recognized the hinge. "Let me go," I said, and realized, with a small humiliation that felt like being forgiven, that I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I was speaking to the version of myself that had liked being kept because kept meant chosen, and chosen meant safe. The marks answered. Heat rolled and then left, a tide pulling back, taking sand with it. Pain burst bright, and then, strange as a laugh in a wake, cooled. The itch fell silent. Under my skin, the circle loosened. Light came, not from above, but out of the stone or the grass or my own stubborn chest. It wasn't bright so much as honest. Colors sharpened without hurting. The gold in the shadow's eyes guttered like a candle starved of air. The howl reached for me one last time. It slid off. It found no purchase. "Felix," the voice said, very small now. "I know," I answered, and I meant it. Me too. Something in the dark accepted that, the way a man accepts a closed door, not because he wishes to, but because his hand has known the shape of a latch long enough to know when it has been turned. The shadow thinned. The edges unspooled. The gold did not go. It dimmed, like coins laid in the mouth of a river. Then the river closed. The ringstones hummed down through lower notes until they reached the one silence could live with. The grass lifted, curious, like a creature propped on its elbows to watch a trick. The air took a breath and let it out. The forest, this stubborn, patient, jealous thing, relaxed its jaw. I stood there with my 2 fingers still hovering over the broken circle and realized my knees were shaking like a man who has walked a distance he did not count. I lowered my hand. I looked at my arm. Where the old marks had been, ridges of pale and heat and memory, there was skin. Not untouched, nothing is. But the story had been smoothed to a scar so thin you only know it is there if you know me. The circle was gone because I had stepped out of it. I could not breathe for a second, not because breath wouldn't come, but because I had never learned how to accept abundance without suspicion. When it did come, it came all at once, ragged and bright, and I laughed. An ugly, beautiful sound. It startled a bird into a legitimate call, and the leaves did not shush it. Kael was in front of me and then not. No lurid rescue, no sweeping embrace. He simply stood where I could see him. He watched me the way you watch a man who has survived his own decision. "Felix," he said. I looked up at him and found my mouth making a shape I hadn't trusted in years. A smile, yes, but with fear inside it still. Because fear is honest. Relief rode it like sunlight rides a blade. "It's quiet," I said, and my voice trembled like something let out of a cage. "Do you hear that?" He listened. His listening has become a skill since morning. He nodded once, slow. "I do," he said. "For the first time since I crossed your lane." The wind nosed past us like a dog reassured its owner had put away the leash. The ring felt less like a throat and more like ribs, protective, not confining. Kael's gaze dropped to my sleeve, the place where the brand had burned. "Your arm," he said, and didn't reach for it. I pushed the wool back and showed him what I had been holding up like a religion for too long. The skin was simply skin. No old heat, no old claim. He breathed out through his mouth. A soldier's relief is quiet, because men like him have learned not to crack under too bright feelings. "I didn't do that," he said. "No," I said. "I did." "Good," he said, and something in the word warmed the coldest part of me. He did not take credit, and he did not withdraw it. The forest tested us once more, a faint thread of sound like a memory of a wind. It didn't say my name. It didn't say anything. It passed, somewhere far off, where the trees first decide to become many again. A dog tried a tentative bark, and then, heartened by the lack of rebuke, another. I stood, breathing the wildly expensive air, and looked at the man who had refused to be a replacement. He was still himself, lines at the eyes, a nick at the ear where a blade had been stupid once, jaw set like a threshold. He did not ask if I was all right. He held the space where I could be. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" he asked, and the genuine confusion made me want to laugh again. "For standing," I said, "until I could." He inclined his head, that small concession soldiers give only to equals or to truths that have earned their height. "You led," he said. I followed. For once I'm content with that. We did not leave the circle quickly. You don't depart a room the world made for your decision as if you've stolen something. We stood until the light found its courage, and dropped more freely. The air lost its iron. The grass stopped leaning, as if the earth had taken its hand back from whatever it had been reaching toward. When we did step out, the hush followed us only as a courtesy. Behind us, the ring of stones resumed being stones. Ahead, the path was still not a path, but my feet did not hesitate. The marks under my sleeve did not wake, because there were none. The place in my chest that had wanted to fall quiet now wanted simply to breathe. Kael walked beside me, close enough that the warmth from his coat could be borrowed, far enough that I never mistook it for a pull. The forest, in its old grudging way, moved aside. I don't know what comes after, I admitted, listening to the ordinary sound of our steps. Neither do I, he said. Good, I said, and the word felt as new as a healed scar. Let's find out anyway. Morning remembered how to be morning. Light came low and gold, combing the boughs so each needle kept a private glint. The fog didn't sit on the ground like a held breath anymore. It lifted in soft columns. Between trunks, the way steam lifts from a kettle when no one is watching it, no hurry. The forest had stopped leaning. It stood back, as if it had realized it didn't have to eavesdrop. I woke to the absence first. No whisper at the beams. No tug at the old place behind my sternum. The quiet was not suspicious. It was generous. I lay in it, counting the ordinary sounds I had forgotten how to trust. The tick of heat in the stove's stones, a bird with poor rhythm and good intentions. The small, proud creak of the porch plank when the sun touched it. The smile started without my permission. It felt awkward on my face, like a coat I'd grown out of and then back into. You're smiling, Kael said. He was in the doorway, shoulder on the frame. The way men stand when they intend to stay 2 breaths and end up staying 10. His coat hung on a peg behind him. Without it, he looked less like a command, and more like a fact. Still solid, still edged, but human first. The line of his mouth was easier than I had ever seen it. I'm practicing, I said. I'm out of shape. He didn't return the smile exactly, but something near his eyes conceded the point. He came inside, and the morning came with him. The light moved a little, farther along the floorboards, as if it had been waiting for a reason. I sat up and swung my feet to the floor. The boards were cool, but not interrogative. I wiggled my toes like a child simply because I could. When I stood, my sleeve slid back. The skin on my forearm was just skin. Kael glanced and glanced away, a soldier's courtesy, then looked back because sometimes witnessing is part of respect. How does it feel? He asked. Like a room with the windows open, I said, and no one outside, listening for the latch. He nodded once. Slow. He had the restraint of a man who knew how to leave a thing alone once it was mended. I went to the kettle. The chipped cup with the hairline crack sat where it always does, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I should apologize to it for being asked to hold too much. When the water took the color of tea, I poured for us both. Kael took his cup, wrapped his hands around it the way cold men do, and didn't drink. He looked into the steam like it might show him the route out of a hard night. Then he set the cup down with care that didn't pretend to be tenderness. Now that you don't have an excuse to talk to the dead, he said. Deadpan. You'll have to talk to me. My laugh startled the bird outside into silence, then coaxed it back. And are you sure you're ready to listen? He considered that, as if weighing rations. No, he said. But I'll be here anyway. That's a terrible sales pitch, I said. Stay for the honest incompetence. It's all I have in stock, he said. We drank, and the tea tasted like what it was instead of what it was not. Some mornings, metaphors are a luxury. Today, plainness felt rich. The lane beyond the window was still empty, but not guardedly so. Far down by the first bend, a dog practiced a bark and then, finding itself unrebuked, improved it. The sound shivered through me and settled somewhere new. The village would wake differently today, not because anyone could name the change, but because their hands would forget to tighten on every latch. You'll need to tell them, Kael said, following my gaze. The families, I will, I said, and I won't make promises I can't keep. I caught his look and added, that was for both of us. He accepted the rebuke, like he accepts weather, noted, endured, unoffended. I set the cup down and looked at my house, the tidy poverty of it, the hooks with my 3 hanging things, the table that had learned how to listen because I had insisted on telling it too much. It didn't look mended. It looked as if it had never been broken. That's the danger of healing. It tempts you to misremember. Will you stay here? Kael asked, as if the question had just occurred to him and had actually been waiting all along. I walked to the door and stood where he had stood 100 patient heartbeats ago. From the porch, the boundary stone was 3 paces away, as always. But today, it didn't look like a border. It looked like a stone, I've been having the same conversation for years, I said. Mostly with myself. Sometimes with other parties. I rested my palm against the doorframe, not touching, almost touching. I think I'm done repeating myself. He said nothing. The silence made room for my next words, and the room felt bigger because of it. I'm leaving, I said, and the relief rode the sentence like a bird that knows the roof is gone. Kael didn't move. He didn't fix his face into triumph or worry or anything that would try to claim the choice for me. The ease in his shoulders deepened, but that was for later, for his own accounting. Any particular direction? He asked. Away, I said. And then toward. His mouth made something like a smile and then reconsidered, as if he didn't want to waste it on anything less than earned. There's a road that doesn't lie to you right away, he said. It runs along the ridge, then down to the river. If you're very lucky, the ferry still believes in schedules. Do you believe in schedules? I believe in showing up, he said. And what are you doing today? I asked, other than standing in my doorway like a structural improvement. He lifted one shoulder. Telling mothers the truth. A pause, not long enough to make pity out of it. Then taking a walk. Along the ridge, I said. Something like that. I went inside and put my things into the small bag I owned and had never trusted. It wasn't much. A better shirt. 2 apples, I don't eat them polite. A book I've read so many times it remembers me back. I left the cracked cup on the table. It had earned its retirement. I took the kettle down. Some objects deserve to see more than one address. When I stepped onto the porch again, Kael had not moved far. He looked at the boundary stone as if making sure it didn't grow legs in his absence. Ready? He asked. Yes, I said. Then, because some habits should be named and laid down, I added, I'm ready because I decided, not because I was taken. He heard the difference. He nodded like a man saluting a flag he respects but does not worship. We walked to the stone together and didn't stop there, and the day didn't tighten its jaw. The forest watched us go the way a good host watches guests leave, making sure we took what we came with, not trying to press leftovers into our hands to keep us from feeling hungry later. A breeze from the trees nosed at my sleeve, and finding nothing to take hold of, carried on. Behind us, a dog discovered a second bark, deeper, and congratulated itself. At the bend in the lane, the village began to appear in pieces, the roof with the stubborn moss, the well with its amenable rope, the square where questions land like stones. People would come out soon. They would look at me with the complicated eyes people save for knives they've cut with and cut by. I could stand that now. Kael matched his step to mine without making a point of it. We didn't touch. We didn't have to. He cleared his throat. About earlier, he said. In your house. Yes. I was not joking, he said. About talking to me. I was not joking either, I said. About whether you can listen. Then we're even, he said. For now, I said. I plan to become very interesting. He didn't smile, but the air around him did. We reached the end of the lane where the track splits, one along the ridge, one back to the square. He paused, the way men pause when they mean to let someone else go first, and also plan to be beside them in 5 strides anyway. I looked past him to the trees. They were only trees. The light on them was ordinary. I lifted my bag and found it did not weigh more than it should. I spent my life talking to the dead, I said. Saying it out loud turned the sentence into an old coat I could fold and put away. I looked at him and let the morning see me choosing. It's time I talked to the living. Kael tipped his head. Just a little. He took the ridge path. I took it too. We went together, and the forest, at last, stayed behind.